And I'm live here on Facebook on Augusta Free Press. Thanks for joining me. I'm Chris Graham. Sorry for the delay. We had advertised to be here at 4 o'clock. I've been trying to track down Scott German. He was going to join me as we were going to talk some UVA and ACC sports news. And actually, I see that Scott is waiting, so I might be able to get him in here. And let's see, I'm going to admit him. And well, this is a first as I'm starting the show here. And Scott is joining me live. And so, Scott, if you can hear me, we just started live. So
I'm here, Chris. Sorry.
All right, Scott. No problem. Thanks for being able to join me. Glad to have you here. And we wanted to talk some UVA and ACC sports news, and also for our viewers out there on the live broadcast, we want to take questions as you may have about what's going on in the sports world. But Scott, how are things going your way out in Central Virginia?
I was in Charlottesville today, Chris, and could not help it, but had to drive by Scott Stadium, and it's looking really nice. It's grass is green, and it's kind of mirroring what's happened with the football program.
Yeah, we'll talk about the big news in UVA football coming up on this show, the signing of a grad transfer quarterback. I wanted to start, though, with news today coming out of the basketball program. We first heard about this yesterday, confirmed by the university today. UVA will play Villanova in a game in December in Madison Square Garden. The two teams who have 3 of the last 4 national championships will be meeting in New York December 19th in a game that will be broadcast live on Fox. And so that's you love Tony Bennett for what he does to schedule these non-conference games, and we played Villanova twice back in 2015 and 2017. They were consecutive seasons. Just one game was in December, one game was in January the next year. But Scott, you got to love what Tony does here, scheduling aggressively with this 2020 season coming up.
Man, my question is, when do we leave?
Yeah, MSG. That's the mecca of college basketball, and so yeah, that's going to be awesome. Jay Wright. I mean, these are 2 of the best coaches in college basketball. Certainly 2 future Hall of Fame coaches in Jay Wright and Tony Bennett. 2 guys who do it right. They're guys who get guys to come and play for long periods of time. They develop them slowly. Very mirror images kind of programs. They recruit good athletes, good academic guys who then go on. A lot of guys go on to careers in the NBA. So. We've loved this matchup. We both covered the game back in 2015. That was a team that was the first Villanova national championship team. They won a few months later their first national championship. That UVA team made it to an Elite 8, should have been in the Final Four that year. So we know these programs can match up and play a good game. That ought to be a heck of a ball game in MSG.
Yeah, that's a great matchup. Between 2 great coaches, 2 Hall of Fame coaches, probably destined to be Hall of Fame coaches. And playing, like you said, in Madison Square Garden. It's been a long time. You've been there and watched basketball sooner than or I think you were a couple years ago. You and Crystal went. Maybe?
Well, we went. We were there for the Sweet 16, the matchup in 2014, UVA Michigan State in the Sweet 16, and the Barclays Center's had the last couple of ACC, or they had a couple of ACC tournaments, and we also went to Barclays for one of those holiday tournaments back in 2014 as well. But yeah, I always wanted to go. It was one of my bucket list kind of things. I want to go to Madison Square Garden for a basketball game, but also I'm probably like you, Scott, in this respect. I want to go to these venues, but I also want to go to them when UVA is playing. I don't want to go to Madison Square Garden to watch the Knicks play the Pacers on a Sunday afternoon. I want to watch it when it means something. And so to be able to see UVA play in a meaningful game in Madison Square Garden, it is the mecca of college basketball. Our view from where I was anyway, they put our UVA contingent of media. We were on the 6th floor of Madison Square Garden, and that's as high as you can imagine, 6 floors above the playing surface. My wife got a ticket. We actually got her a ticket in the squad guest section. She was on the floor sitting with players' families. I don't know how that worked out that she got there, and I was up on the 6th floor. She texted me and said, "Hey, Chris, here's a picture where I'm sitting." And Spike Lee was like 2 rows ahead of her and in the picture. And she said, "Send me a picture where you're sitting." I said, "I don't need to send you a picture. Do you see that Walt Clyde Frazier jersey hanging up there, the number 10 jersey hanging from the rafters? I can probably touch it from where I'm sitting." So But that said, I was in MSG watching UVA play basketball, so I don't want to complain but so much.
Yeah, I was. It's long been a standing saying that some cheap seats are in better locations than the media seating in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, I had a feeling that if Godzilla had come back and instead of climbing to the top of the Empire State Building, he would have been below us with Fay Ray in his hands, I guess, swatting planes. That's how high up we were in MSG. But hey, we were there. And
you're still there. You're in the building. So before I forget, before we get off topic, because we tend to sometimes, and then we sign off, and I'm like, forgot to ask. I have a question for you, and it's directly related to college basketball. Why does the University of Louisville still have a basketball program?
Well, I wanted to talk about Louisville. I also wanted to bring up Wake Forest and some goings on there. We had talked about Wake last time you and I got together. But Louisville first. Yeah, Louisville hit with a notice of allegations from the NCAA. Now, of course, this dates back still. I mean, this is how long the NCAA takes to do what it does. This dates back to when Rick Pitino was still the coach, and Brian Bowen, the recruitment of five-star athlete Brian Bowen from Michigan, and the fallout from the 2017, actually the 2016 NCAA FBI investigation led to a 2017 dismissal of Rick Pitino. Boy, they had Scott Padgett serve as their interim coach for a whole season, and they're now 2 seasons into Chris Mack being their new head coach. So he's not even a new head coach anymore. He'll be going into year 3 this year. That's how long it takes the NCAA to do what they do. This notice of allegations dates back to Rick Pitino's coaching tenure, which ended abruptly in October of 2017. And, it makes me wonder, Scott, what's going to happen here with this, because, now you're 3 coaches removed from the allegations. I think it means probably more, honestly. Rick Pitino just got hired. I say just, it was a few weeks ago, by Iona to be their new head coach. If there's any resolution to this case eventually that, makes him look bad in this, maybe he's not the coach at Iona when push comes to shove, or he's let go, depending on how long this takes. Louisville probably gets a slap on the wrist, because that's what happens. Programs that compete for national championships don't get much to happen to them, as we know from the UNC academic scandal. It's still getting other people slapped on the wrist for that. But yeah, I would be surprised if anything happens to Louisville out of this, and maybe it wouldn't be fair because we're so far removed. I don't even know if there's a player on the roster anymore that would have been on that team. So, but yeah, it's he was let go in October of 2017 related to this Brian Bowen scandal, and they were still in the immediate aftermath of the fallout from that other scandal that got that banner taken down. So your question's a valid one. How many times you got to get caught with your hand in the cookie jar before they just cut you off?
Yeah, and I agree. There's probably very little that's going to happen to Louisville, but I don't understand why Pitino is allowed to coach. There is a phrase in the NCAA, just cause. Why was that not labeled upon him? Because my gosh, everywhere he goes, he leaves a trail of destruction and scandal.
Well, I guess in this case, you got to give him due process. It's an adjudication kind of thing now. And maybe a bigger question too would be, why are we almost 3 full years past him resigning that job at Louisville, being forced to resign? I guess he resigned. He was pushed out, however you want to phrase it. If they tell you they're going to fire you if you don't resign, is it really a resignation? But we're almost 3 years past that, and they're just now sending that notice of allegations out. So, to be fair, he's got to go through that process. That's probably why, honestly, Iona has the opportunity to even hire a Rick Pitino caliber coach, because no one else is going to take the chance on a guy who may be your coach for 3 months or 6 months, just one season, whatever it may be. And then have that guy given a show cause order, can't coach anymore. That's why he's at Iona and not somewhere else, because Pitino's still Pitino. I think it's a valid question, Scott.
You know, and speaking of Iona, you got to wonder if you're a alumni of Iona or just an ardent fan, you can't feel very good about this.
No, you can't. I mean, I agree with that. You know, on the one hand, I'm not even. I was getting ready to say you're probably, you know, if you were an Iona alum, you were probably excited, you know, 6 weeks ago when he was named your coach. But I'm not sure if I would have been too excited because you know why you got him. You know, it's you got him because there's dirt and around his periphery and you know you just have to wonder how long he'd even be there. One, okay, so let's say he's there for a season and in the NCAA uh, issues its findings and all they do is fine him or something of that nature. Because again, I'll bring up that 2013 scandal involving the strippers and you know being deemed improper benefits, which led to that national championship banner being taken down. If you might remember, I didn't remember this when I first looked this up when I was writing about the show called the notice of allegations that was handed down last week by the NCAA to Louisville. But he actually, before he resigned because of this scandal, he was given a 5-game suspension. ACC. He was going to sit out the first 5 games of the ACC season in 2017-2018 before they just decided to fire him or you know force him out the door, or whatever. So if you're Iona, okay, yeah. If in the end all he gets is a slap on the wrist, well, he's going to be there for a year and he's going to take a bigger job somewhere else. At least if you know he'll be looking, his agent will be looking for one. And then if he gets you know the big you know hammer down from the NCAA, then he's not your coach either way. He's not going to be at Iona very long, a year or two at the most. He's either going to go and get a job somewhere else, or he's finally going to go right off in the sunset with guns pointed at his back by the NCAA. So yeah, I really don't understand in either way why Iona is doing any of this stuff with Pitino.
You know, I wish we had a rewind button because all I need to know about Rick Pitino and if you wonder why would I even ask why is he coaching, is that you had a sentence a couple of minutes ago, an NCAA scandal and strippers. that just doesn't have a good ring to it. And actually you cleaned it up because you could have added prostitutes, strippers, drugs. Yet Louisville gets the slap on the wrist and Rick Pitino is free to go coach and destroy another program.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know how much you can really do at Iona in terms of destroying that program. I don't know that, for example, the quality of the strippers you have available to you, I'll say cynically, would be quite as good as Iona. They might be at the ACC level. But you know, I mean, I guess, you know, everything's relative. Yeah, maybe I should stop talking about that in that respect because I'm going to get myself in trouble. But yeah, it's you know, yeah, you play with fire when you hire a guy like Rick, especially now. I mean, you know, they're always the guys who coach at Kentucky, who have the Kentucky ties. They always end up just feeling a little too slick. I mean, Calipari just feels way too slick. I mean, Pitino certainly had that feel to him. So they had that little run with or whatever they tried to do with Billy Gillispie. That felt really just that was out of place. But except for at Kentucky. No, you know, I don't know. Again, I don't understand what Iona's doing. They think that they're building something here. I can't imagine that. But from a Louisville perspective, again, you know, they're the ACC, and they're in the ACC. From a Virginia perspective, they're the team that we're guaranteed to play twice a year. They're one of 2 teams we're guaranteed to play twice a year. The other being Virginia Tech. So Louisville means a lot to Virginia from a basketball perspective. Yeah, I really, I mean, it's the NCAA. They're not going to do anything to Louisville. The most they'll make them do is take down another banner of some sort, but I don't think they've put any up for a while. So, you know, I don't know what else you can do to them. Do they have to like disavow their knowledge of Dr. Duncanstein? You know, whatever they can do to them at this point, it's not going to really mean anything on the court. I just can't imagine that. I mean, you don't hit the blue bloods. We know that the NCAA is not going to do anything to Louisville.
Well, the Carolina case proved that. And if you talk about scandals, and you know normally associate Kentucky or Louisville, but what Carolina got away with that rivaled anything Kentucky or Louisville is not, in my opinion.
Well, it's academics. I mean, that's part of
Academics.
it. Yeah.
And it was academic fraud at its greatest, extent, in my opinion.
Oh, it hasn't went on for roughly 20 years and involved a program that was largely a program that was something that boosted the grades of not just basketball, football, other athletes. So I'm sure that the University of Northern Colorado is shaking in its boots, waiting for the NCAA to come down on UNC, because that'll be the UNC that gets come down on if it's anybody out of that scandal, which is really interesting. Butch Davis lost his job as a result of that, and that was a long time ago, and it never really got resolved afterwards. So obviously somebody admitted something, and then it just went away. So I thought I'd bring up Wake Forest. We talked, Scott, about Wake Forest when the last time you and I talked in depth. We talked about the coaching job that was open. Danny Manning finally let go by Wake Forest. Ultimately, Wake went with Steve Forbes, the coach at East Tennessee State. I can't fault the move there. In 5 seasons, he won 130 games. He won 30 games this past season. Never won less than 24 in the 5 years he was at ETSU. Now that's the Southern Conference, but he, obviously had success there. Now what Wake is hoping for is he'll build it in Winston-Salem. He'll have to build, though, without his what would have been his leading returning scorer, Olivier Sarr, the 7-foot junior rising senior, deciding after Manning was fired to enter the transfer portal. He then talked with the new coaching staff, Steve Forbes' new coaching staff, and we just talked about the state, so we got to bring it back up. Sarr decides to go, of all places, to Kentucky. So Wake Forest will be without its leading returning scorer for this coming season. And God, I gotta say, Scott, I mean, that Wake team gave Virginia a game down in Winston-Salem, went to overtime before Virginia was able to get the win. Sarr was a really good player, third-team All-ACC, 13.7 points, 9 rebounds a game. He would have been a leading candidate, I got to think, for first-team All-ACC status this coming season. So that's a big loss for Wake to lose a guy like that.
Oh, definitely, and that's another program that is in dire straits right now. I was reading a story in the Winston-Salem Journal a couple of nights ago. They have 2 players on their roster.
Yeah,
2 right now. One of the reasons that maybe Forbes got the job is he does, and I think Wes Miller may have been listening to us when we talked about, did he really want to leave UNCG to go to Wake Forest when the ultimate caveat is North Carolina? Maybe just stay at UNCG another year or 2. Forbes has a history of being able to build a roster real quick. He did it at East Tennessee State. He knows how to recruit the JUCO market. So maybe that's one of the things that appeal to the AD at Wake is this guy can come in and build a roster relatively from scratch. And that's what he's going to have to do. They have 2 players on their entire roster. And I'm not sure if the transfer was counted as one of them. They may just be down to 1 now. 1 player.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up real quick. I think you're right about that. I remember when I was breaking down their roster after the season and trying to look ahead to what they would have for a new coach. I remember 2 guys, and certainly Sarr was the guy that to me would have been the guy you would build around. They were losing Childress, their leading scorer, Brandon Childress. You look at it, Andrian White is also leaving. He was a really good guard for them, I thought. Chaundi Brown would be the other guy that I would look at. Actually, I think there's a couple other guys. Maybe when you talk about only 2 players, you're probably talking about 2 rotation players left. Chaundi Brown will be a rising senior, and Isaiah Musius will be back as well, a guy who played some minutes for them. Jacoby Neath was a bench player for them. He'll be back. But other than that, yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty there at Wake. Not a lot of contributors. I think that's the grander point, is that you don't have a lot coming back that offered much in terms of scoring, really more than just some rotation minutes for this Wake Forest roster. And a roster that gets its coach fired, then you lose. I mean, essentially they're losing 3 of their top 4 scorers, 2 to graduation and then Sarr to transfer route. And I got to say this about the Sarr departure too. This is an odd part of this one for me. When he was talking with ESPN after he announced he wanted to enter the transfer portal, the ESPN reporter asked him his thoughts on, okay, because he's not going to graduate. He's not going to be a grad transfer who will be eligible immediately. He would have to get a waiver. And those waivers, as we know, as UVA basketball observers, they're not automatic. Braxton Key did get an automatic, or he did get that transfer waiver a couple of years ago for Virginia, was able to play immediately. This past year, obviously, Sam Hauser did not get that. And so he had to sit out that transfer year. So it's not a process that is at all a given that he'll get that red shirt or not have to sit out a red shirt year, I should say. And Sarr had indicated to ESPN that he was not interested in sitting out a year. He's not transferring away to then go sit for a year somewhere else. If he didn't get that waiver, that he would just go pro. And of course, he's not declared for the draft, so he would go pro in Europe. He's a native of France, so he said he would play a year in Europe and then go in the NBA draft. So he's still transferring out. I mean, it's not a guarantee that going to Kentucky is going to do anything for him. Aside from maybe just delaying the inevitable for him. So that says something to me about a guy who really just wanted to get out the door as quickly as possible.
Oh, for certain. So in this article that I was reading in the Winston-Salem Journal, I felt it funny because Forbes made it very clear that his number one recruit once he got in on campus at Wake in Winston-Salem, his number one recruit was Sarr's, and his pitch. Have you ever heard the old saying, when someone starts off a sentence by saying, "Now, there's no disrespect meant here. You're getting ready to be very well disrespected." So his number one pitch, his recruiting pitch to Stars was, "You've spent 3 years getting your undergraduate degree at Wake Forest. Why in the world would you want to finish it at Kentucky?"
I loved when I saw that. That was great. Because I think that a lot.
No disrespect intended now.
No disrespect. I'm just telling you the God's honest truth, son.
And you know what? I felt like he's got a point.
He's got a point. I think we talk about this, Scott, when we've had some players transferring away from UVA from the basketball perspective. Marco Anthony left after last year, for example. I remember Tevin Jones, a kid I knew really well because I worked with him when he was at Fishburne Military School just up the street from me. And they transferred out. And to me, it's like, okay, you're transferring out to get more minutes and have a chance at maybe a pro career. That's fine. But, yeah, you're transferring from a UVA to go to – I mean, I don't know where. I think Marco Anthony ended up at Texas San Antonio.
Yeah, UTSA.
Yeah, so University of Texas San Antonio. So when you're 30 years old, you're 40, you're 50, you're 60, and you look up on the wall and you've got that degree hanging on your wall, or you could have a UVA degree hanging on your wall. That's something. I mean, if you're Olivier Sarr, now those guys probably weren't going to be, NBA players, and they turned out not to be. Or Tevin Jones didn't. I don't. Marco Anthony's not going to be an NBA player either. Nothing against him. He's not going to be an NBA player. Olivier Sarr could be an NBA player. I'm not sure. I mean, going to Kentucky maybe for a year will help him get. What's Calipari going to do from a coaching perspective? He's a roll the ball out there and let him play kind of coach. But playing for Kentucky will do whatever it does for you. But still, yeah, when you're 30, when you're 40, when you're 60, when you're 80, when you look up on your wall and you've got a degree from Kentucky, that's not quite the same. The Wake Forest degree is going to be much more valuable to you down the line. So but that does say a lot as far as the pitch. And to me, I like the pitch because what else are you going to do to compete with Kentucky? I can't compete with John Calipari, but I got a better degree.
So here, I just found it. Here's the actual quote, and I love it. So Forbes, upon arriving at Wake Forest, said he's our number one recruit of Sarr. And his actual comment was, "Why would you go to Wake Forest for 3 years and put in all that time to get this prestigious degree and then get your degree at a place like Kentucky? No disrespect intended."
He's just being honest, he's just being honest.
I don't believe Wake Forest is going to be very successful in maybe lining up a game against Kentucky anytime soon in badminton.
Well, I guess Forbes hopes he'll build Wake Forest up to a point where they'll play in Rupp Arena and he'll walk out with a win. So that will be worth it. It'll be the other side of Jim Boeheim having to play a game in Greensboro, which he doesn't like doing that either.
If Wake gets a contract with Kentucky in basketball, I'm sure it'll be something like, yeah, we'll play you. We'll have a contractual agreement. You play us the first 100 times in Rupp Arena, and then maybe if the world is still here, we'll play you in Winston-Salem or probably at a neutral site.
Neutral, yeah, 100-0-1. Yeah. No, I love the pitch. I mean, that already we're getting the indication of what kind of a recruiter Steve Forbes is. You said he's got the reputation of putting a roster together pretty quickly. He's going to have that now that he's lost another. He recognized it right away. Top recruit was going to be Sarr, and he loses Sarr. So let's switch gears to football now. Virginia football. And Scott, I have to give you credit for this. We've been talking Virginia football. And first, let me mention, I got a couple of comments on the stream here. Someone named Elizabeth German, Scott, who I believe you may be familiar with. Her comment was simply "Go Hoos." Rod Mullins offered an observation on Rick Pitino. He calls Rick Pitino basketball's Al Capone. I think that's pretty on line there from our good friend Rod Mullins, who covers NASCAR for us.
Or Tony Soprano.
It maybe both enrolled up in one.
Yeah.
Capone fits because Tony Soprano was a little beefier, and Pitino is a little. He's a little more Godfatherish, honestly. He would have fit perfectly in a Godfather movie or any of those movies with Joe Pesci and all those guys when they did those gangster send-ups in the early '90s. Yeah, that Pitino is straight out of Central character from that. So I want to talk some football, particularly with UVA football. Again, giving you credit, Scott. When the season ended last year, in fact, even before last season ended, we talked about the succession plan at quarterback. And after the great 2-year run from Bryce Perkins, record-setting run for Bryce Perkins as UVA's quarterback the past 2 seasons, Virginia had an heir apparent in the program in Brendan Armstrong, who got game action the last 2 years, and some meaningful game action, not just handing the ball off at the end of games, but he got some meaningful game action the past couple of years. He came in early. He graduated high school a semester early to be able to be part of his spring practice as a true freshman. But he was able to redshirt, so he has 3 years of eligibility left, and he's been in the program for 2.5 years. That's a huge advantage for a program. And so, I was making this out of the argument of UVA set. They got their guy. They're ready to hand the ball off to him. And you were never sold on Brennan Armstrong as being the guy. And you were questioning when the season ended immediately, hey, why aren't they out there looking for a grad transfer quarterback? Because actually the transfer route worked well for UVA each of the past 2 cycles. Bryce Perkins was not a grad transfer, but he was a JUCO transfer, able to come in and play right away. He plugged right in and played 2 years. After Kurt Bankert came in, he was a grad transfer. He was Bronco Mendenhall's first quarterback. They inherited him. He had 2 years of eligibility after graduating early from East Carolina University, and he's in the NFL. Bryce Perkins is now in the NFL. And so now Keaton Thompson comes in with pedigree unlike anybody UVA's had at quarterback, maybe dating back. I'm thinking all the way back to Sean Moore, Scott, but I'll let you weigh in a second. I want to give our viewers out there just a little sense of Keaton Thompson. Thompson is a guy that was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, the Mr. Louisiana Player of the Year in Louisiana in 2016. He was given the ball late his true freshman season at Mississippi State, where he originally signed. Dan Mullen, now the coach at Florida, was the guy who recruited him. Dan Mullen with a great pedigree as an offensive mind and a guy who develops quarterback talent. He started the Tax Slayer Bowl, the former Gator Bowl, as a true freshman, actually outplayed Lamar Jackson in that game. He led his team to a 31-27 win over that Louisville team. He threw for 127 yards, ran for 147 and 3 touchdowns, tying a bowl game record in that win. But then Mullen left after that season. In fact, he had already left before that bowl game to go to Florida. The replacement was a guy named Joe Moorhead, who here's how good things went for Joe Moorhead at Mississippi State. He went 14-12 in 2 seasons. He's already fired but he brought in a grad transfer quarterback from Penn State, Tommy Stevens, had a quarterback battle, eventually named Stevens his starter. And Thompson then redshirted this year, only played one game, redshirted this year, went in the transfer portal, and he immediately comes to Virginia. So here's what you got with Thompson versus Armstrong. Armstrong, a 3-star quarterback, not a lot of great offers coming out of high school. He's got 2.5 years in the program. That's his advantage. No starts, but he's got some experience in the program. Thompson, 4-star quarterback, SEC experience, 6'4", 225. He fits. He reminds you when you see tape of him. He reminds you of Bryce Perkins. He reminds you of Taysom Hill, another quarterback that played for Bronco Mendenhall at BYU. Scott, this guy didn't sign with Virginia to hold the clipboard. This guy signed with Virginia to be the starter.
Well, that was my thought is, whoa, wait a minute. What's going on here? So if you think about, I remember saying that early after the season ended, that obviously the backup quarterback probably was not in the fold at UVA with Stone and the other. Is he a redshirt freshman now?
Well, Luke Wentz, the kid from Germany, was injured last year. He's a redshirt freshman now. Yeah, and they got a recruit that came in from South Bend, Indiana, who's a true freshman. Stone was a Mike London recruit. He's a drop back quarterback. Does not fit the system that Robert Anae and Jason Beck run offensively.
Yeah. So my thought was, why is Bronco not looking, or will he look at the either the Bryce Perkins type route, junior college route, or transfer portal a little later than I thought? But it really wasn't that I was not sold on Armstrong. And now moving fast forward 3 or 4 months, if you think about Armstrong, if you look at some of the responses from players, Bryce Perkins, Bryce Hall, they've got Armstrong's back. There can't be enough accolades about what a great player he's going to be at UVA, how he's mastered the system. And so he's got a lot of support within the ranks of the football team. And if you think about it, Armstrong is Bronco be going into year 5, correct?
That's right.
Armstrong is the first quarterback that Bronco has recruited out of high school. So, I mean, to me, he knew what he wanted in Armstrong when he was in high school. So I don't look for this to be neither one of Armstrong's not just going to hand over this starting position that he's well-deserved, has well-deservingly earned. And also, Thompson's not coming there to sit on the bench. This is going to bode very well for UVA.
Well, here's what I want to break it down, because we'll bounce off these ideas off each other and see where we come up, and see if any of our listeners out there or our viewers out there want to throw some thoughts in too. But here's to me where it stands. Okay, if there's no COVID-19 and if life goes on as normal, and we have spring practice, I don't know that there's a Keaton Thompson in the Virginia program, because if you go through at this point, we would have already been through spring. Brennan Armstrong has gone through a 28-day period with 15 practices, a spring game, whatever equivalent of a spring game we play at Virginia, and he's number 1 guy. He's QB1. And at that point, then you say goodbye. Everybody goes to the summer. They're working on their conditioning. They're throwing to receivers and that kind of thing. But it's his team at that point. The transfer is made. It was Perkins' team. When they got on the plane to go to Miami, when they got off the bus coming to Charlottesville, it was going to be Armstrong's team, and now it's his team. But there was no spring practice this year, and it was talked about a lot. We've had these Zoom conferences with Bronco, with Robert and I, with the players, as you mentioned, Scott, and Armstrong was one of the guys we got to talk with, and they didn't get to have a spring practice. And I've noted this in a column I wrote about this week, Scott. I know you read it because you commented on it. When Anae was asked about Armstrong, he actually talked about the fact that there was no spring practice this year. And he said he made it a point at the end of that long comment about Brennan Armstrong to say something to the effect of, in fact, I've got the exact quote here up on my screen. Let me pull this up here real quick. He said, "We have not named a starting quarterback. Obviously Brennan is a prime candidate there, but whoever that quarterback will become when we play Georgia, I'm confident he will be a player that represents the university, and I think our fans will really look forward to breaking in this new group." Now, I noted that from a timing standpoint, that interview was on April 17th, a Friday afternoon. And it wasn't formally until Monday, April 20th, the weekend plus the Monday morning later, that Keaton Thompson was formally, his name was entered into the transfer portal. But it was known really all offseason that was going to be the case, because he'd entered the transfer portal last year and then got talked out of transferring, and then he ended up sitting out the year. So I don't know that Anai, Mendenhall, Jason Beck, the quarterback's coach, I don't know that they knew that Keaton Thompson specifically was available. But, man, on April 17th, Robert Anai was telling us that Brennan Armstrong hadn't been named the starting quarterback. Now, when I first heard the comment, Scott, I have to say, I wrote this in the column, I thought it was a Bronco Mendenhall thing. The program is, everything's earned, not given. So, yeah, we haven't named the starting quarterback yet. I'm thinking now that Robert Anai was not just selling us something that Bronco Mendenhall says all the time, you have to earn your spot. I think they weren't sold. And when this guy comes up, 4-star, 6'4", 225, guy who can throw for 300 yards, run for 200 yards, looks like Bryce Perkins, maybe even a slightly better version of Bryce Perkins, they jumped at the chance to get this kid.
There may be something to that. The only thing I would question, and I'm not really questioning it, I'm saying, what has Armstrong done that sort of devalued him? And because he hasn't played in really competitive type games yet, so he's done everything the program has asked of him, actually. But I wonder, I think you make a very valid point that if something happens that Thompson does, go on and become the starter, which is going to be difficult because he's no spring ball. He's going to have to walk in when the team meets again, hopefully in August, and pick up the system. He's probably already got a copy of the playbook, so to speak. But what has Armstrong done to devalue his stock enough that Virginia jumps at the opportunity of bringing in a player such as the caliber of such as Thompson?
I'll be a politician here, and I won't answer your question. I'll answer a different question. It's not what Thompson's done or what Armstrong has done. It's what he's not. He's a 3-star recruit who can't no matter how much golf I play, I will never play golf as good as Tiger Woods does. So no matter what you do, no matter how hard you work, there are just guys who are better athletes. So when you have a chance, if you're Bronco Mendenhall, if you're Robert Anai, if you're Jason Beck, and a guy with the talent that Keaton Thompson has, is interested in you. Now, if Bryce Perkins was back, Keaton Thompson is not even interested in UVA. But if you have the caliber of athlete like a Bryce Perkins at quarterback, you're not looking for another guy. It's not to say that Armstrong's done anything wrong. It's just that, was he recruited to be a starting quarterback? Was he ever thought of as the guy who could lead an ACC program to the heights that Virginia's at now? I mean, you won you won your division, you played in a championship game, you played in the Orange Bowl, and then a guy like Thompson, who again was the player of the year in Louisiana, put up jaw-dropping numbers as a high school player there, and was recruited by a guy like Dan Mullen, who is a quarterback guru. And before Mullen left, he made Thompson his heir apparent. He started him in a bowl game against Lamar Jackson for a reason. I mean, that's the kid that, that's going to be our future right there. And then, the next coaching staff sees things differently. And now Mike Leach is the coach at Mississippi State, and they run a different offense. Their air raid offense is is built on a drop back quarterback who throws it 65 times a game. He wouldn't be able to use a kid like Thompson, who is just as dangerous with his feet as he is with his arm. So Armstrong has a similar game. I mean, he can run, he can throw, but he can't run and throw like Thompson. I mean, so it's not that Armstrong's done anything wrong. And yeah, he'll have to go in and win. Somebody's going to have to go in and win that job at this stage. It's not Armstrong is not going to be the guy now. Thompson's not coming in as the guy. But I tell you what, again, looking at Thompson and looking at that pedigree, 4-star SEC experience, 6'4", 225, all those intangibles. A kid like that can go where he wants to in college football. He doesn't have to look around and see if he can scrounge a backup job up. Out of the heap. So it's a unique situation for everybody. You think about the first opponent Virginia's got on the schedule, Georgia. They'll have a new quarterback. He's a grad transfer, Jamie Newman, the quarterback of the past couple of years at Wake Forest. No spring practice for him. We will play. I'm trying to think. There was another one. Miami's quarterback, De'Aaron King, transferred from Houston. No spring practice. He'll take over this summer whenever things get back, and he'll have to go without. So it wouldn't be unprecedented for even this year for Keaton Thompson to walk in and be handed the starting job or win the starting job over experienced guys. I just think that you got to look at that talent base and say, man, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for Armstrong, even with 2.5 years experience in a program, to outplay Thompson and win that job.
Yeah, and these Thompson are obviously highly recruited out of high school. He's got confidence, and I don't think maybe that wasn't a factor. Maybe he didn't really take into consideration the quarterback situation at Virginia. His confidence level is probably high enough that he knows he can come in. He's such an athlete. He'll win that job. I think you're spot on as well in your observation about what if we weren't in a world with COVID-19. Armstrong gets the benefit of having the entire spring football. And, I'm sure they're going to put him out there. I'm sure had we had a spring, he would have been put into situations to really build his confidence up. Thompson may not have considered UVA if Armstrong would have had the benefit of an actual spring practice session.
And that would have been now. This is where I'm going to pitch our good friend Jerry Ratcliffe, Scott Ratcliffe. They've launched a new podcast, Wahoo World. And I listened to their podcast today, their second podcast today. They went in depth about the football program, talked a lot about Keaton Thompson and the quarterback situation. Jerry sees it a little differently than I do. He sees Thompson coming in. He sees Armstrong as the established guy, and if Thompson wins a job, he'll have to beat Armstrong for the job. I don't see it that way. And I'm going back to Anai's own comments. But Jerry, I'll go with what Jerry had to say for a second. Jerry says at the least, he points out that last year, it's one of those nuanced things, but we all got frustrated with the offensive approach for a few games because it got really conservative there for a while. And actually, when you look back on it, it was because Armstrong, the backup, got hurt at the end of that William & Mary game. Remember, Armstrong came in after the big lead. He threw 10 passes, threw a pick six, and on that pick six, he injured himself trying to make a tackle. He missed a few games. He missed a few games as the backup. He didn't play in the game. He wasn't going to play in the games anyway as a backup. But not having him available as a backup, when the way Virginia plays offense, the quarterback may have to run the ball 15, 20 times a game. And when you put your quarterback at risk by running him 15 or 20 times a game, you've got to have a guy backing him up just in case he gets hurt that can come in and play either a couple plays or finish the game out for you. And we saw that's where Armstrong got his a lot of his snaps in when to me, the live game action. He would play a few series, the Georgia Tech game a couple years ago, the Louisville game a couple years ago, because Perkins got hurt and he came in and was able to fill in for a series or two. So the play calling got kind of vanilla because there was no backup. And so then you get Armstrong back, and then the offense goes wide open and has that great stretch in November into December, and things going from there. So Jerry sees at the very least having Thompson in the mix means you got two quarterbacks And in Bronco and Anai and Jason Beck's system, you need two quarterbacks to be able to run, wide open and do what you need to do. So, in that realm, Jerry's kind of not picking sides. He's just saying we got two guys now you can rely upon, and that's going to make it so this Virginia team's a better team next year.
Well, the flip side of that, playing devil's advocate, Armstrong, let's say he does lose his job. Does he say, look, I'm not going to sit and be a backup quarterback and lose 2 years of my eligibility? Does he go somewhere? You know,
it's possible. It's very possible.
I mean, because we're seeing this transfer, is just, it's like a wildfire. It's just out of control right now. He may think that, look, I paid my dues, did everything the coach wanted me, and then all of a sudden I have the rug pulled out from me and I'm not the starter. And I've got 3 years of eligibility, correct?
He still has 3 at this stage. If he were to leave now, yeah, he has 3 years, yeah.
And he would be, he'd be a very highly sought after transfer, in my opinion.
Highly sought after at not the level that a Thompson would be, though. Don't want to cast any aspersions on Armstrong, but when you look at his offers out of high school and think about where he is now, he would be a mid-major guy. He could be an FCS guy. He would go and be able to go in and compete right away. Certainly at the FCS level, because you don't have to sit out the transfer year. I don't know that you're going to get other Power Fives interested in him because he doesn't have that pedigree yet. And also, if he leaves now, just throwing this out there, we're not saying he's thinking about this. We don't have it. This is totally speculative, but I think it's a good academic exercise to preserve his 3 years of eligibility. That's the important thing, right? So if he were to say, "Oh gosh, well this guy's coming in, I'm going to save my 3 years of eligibility and transfer now," if he does that, he's saying to the world, "I don't think I can win this job," and whereas Thompson has the confidence that I'm going to go in there and take this job out from this guy's hands and be an ACC quarterback. The message that Armstrong will be sending there would be, I just don't think I can compete with this guy. And I don't, when you're talking about a quarterback, that got to be the leader of your team. Whereas now, if he finishes up this year, goes and competes in the summer, loses the job somehow, ends up being the backup this year. I would assume without knowing, and Scott's dealing with his dogs there, I would assume without knowing that Thompson is proceeding towards being able to graduate. If he could play this year, even be the backup this year, and be a grad transfer himself, he could preserve 2 years and be able to be a grad transfer, and do so sort of the Jalen Hurts route. Don't sulk and leave and everything else. Stay there, then leave, and then be a grad transfer in a couple of years. I mean, it's kind of going down a line there, but I don't know. I would if I'm a coach looking for a quarterback and I see a guy who runs away from a fight, I don't know that I want that guy to be my quarterback.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm not advocating that he would do that suggesting that he would do that. I'm just saying that coaches think of all the scenarios, and that would be one that you would think, would we run him off if he didn't win the starting job? So, but I know Bronco, and we know how thoroughly prepared he is, and Robert and I'm sure they know that Armstrong is a fighter, and that's maybe exactly the perfect storm for UVA. That's what you want. You want that keen competition with that starting quarterback, and things are looking really well for UVA football. Not quite as well down in Southwest Virginia, though. I can't let this podcast end without mentioning the situation at Tech. Yeah,
well, and what do you want to get into specifically? There's so much to dive into there. I mean, I know a number of guys in the transfer portal. They lost some guys. They lost a couple guys who left early for the NFL. Kind of surprising. Dalton Keene was one of those. I heard his name drafted too, so it worked out well for him. And of course, I mean, just dating back to the rather awkward courtship that our guy Justin Fuente initiated with Baylor. So anything more specific than that, or just generally?
Well, I think they had a decommit.
Oh yeah. They've
a decommit, and you just wonder, how from a PR standpoint, Fuentes, how does he overcome that? Because it was clear he did not want to be at Tech. Whether or not he just, I mean, if you listen to that camp, he decided, oh, Tech the grass isn't greener on the other side of the fence. And he went back to Tech, or maybe Baylor, or was it Baylor?
It was Baylor, yeah.
Said no thanks. I mean, whatever. It had to be a PR nightmare for Tech, and you just wonder how will they ever overcome that with Fuentes as head coach.
And Jerry talked about that on his podcast too. It just sends a message out. I mean, I was talking about Armstrong earlier. If he were, speculative times 10 to think about transferring out now that Keaton Thompson's in the mix in UVA, it would send the message, hey, I'm a quitter. Justin Fuentes already sent that message out. He's turned tail and tried to run, and just didn't get interest on the other side to get him to be able to finish that deal. And it makes you wonder. I mean, he's losing commitments from key guys. Virginia's winning the in-state recruiting battle. Boy, I mean, I'll recommend to our listeners out there, go to podbean.com, look for Wahoo World.
Scott, excellent podcast. Excellent.
He did a great job. I literally just listened to it this afternoon. It was from earlier this week, but Scott and Jerry went down everything you can imagine about this year's recruiting class, even next couple of years recruiting classes. And it's an hour of very good information. But I mean, yeah, Virginia's winning the recruiting battle in state. They're winning the recruiting battle vis-a-vis Virginia Tech overall. That's an important part of this. Having the talent to work with is an important part of this. And and you think about where things were 4 years ago when these two guys both came in, Bronco and Justin Fuente both came in. Fuente inherited a program from a legend in Frank Beamer. He was given a group that his first year won 10 games and went to the ACC championship game. And Bronco was taken over for a guy who got fired. He was given a group that won 2 games that first year. And now, 4 years into this, going into year 5, Bronco has built up from 2 wins to an Orange Bowl berth. And Fuente's gone from 10 wins to barely getting into a bowl and losing recruits and trying to get another job and everything else. So, yeah.
And losing your iconic defensive coordinator.
Yeah, which you have to presume, it was never said, but you have to presume it's because of some sort of personality clash. Bud Foster's 60 years old. He's a baby and a relative pup compared to most guys out there. So if you can't keep Bud Foster happy and the personality clash leads to a change there, man, oh man, yeah, this is a big year for Fuente down in Blacksburg.
Yeah, and one thing two things talking about recruiting. Broncos proved that he has elevated Virginia to a national recruiting school. They can recruit all over the country. They've recruited California. They've recruited Hawaii. They've gotten some really good talent out of pretty much all, the entire country. Not sure Tech's Tech's brand is to the level that they can recruit nationwide. And I think that what's happening to Tech could very well be what UVA experienced when George was kind of nudged out the door and they brought in Mike London. And it falls under the mentality, the old saying, you don't want to be the man that replaces the man. And then, Grow replaces Welsh, and then London. And in Broncos coming in and picking up the pieces, he's not the man that replaces the man. He's the man that replaced a man, just a Joe Schmo. And a coach that just basically crippled the program. Fuentes is following the footsteps of a legend, and we, myself especially. It took a long time. It took till after he left the program to really appreciate what a great guy Frank Beamer was.
Yeah.
Feel bad I guess it just falls under the category, well, he's not one of us, so he's one of them, and you can't like him. But, man, Tech has some big shoes to fill. and trying to find a coach that'll live up to Coach Beamer.
Well, I mean, you look at the recruiting rankings the last couple of years, Scott, you talked about the recruiting. Tech was their recruiting class for 2020 was the lowest rated recruiting class of everybody in the Power Five. They were 83rd overall nationally. And then you look at the 2021 class, and this is what Scott and Jerry broke down so well on Wahoo World. Right now, where the recruiting rankings are for 2021, and the May recruiting period goes through, I think, towards the end of the month. Virginia's 21st nationally, and that's as high as I've ever seen a Virginia class dating back to the Welsh era, and Tech's 54th. And so the strength of Tech football, you talked about it well. After the Welsh era, Virginia, Al Groh had a couple of good recruiting classes, and then things fell off. Mike Lunn had a couple of good recruiting classes, things fell off. Frank Beamer just recruited Virginia, recruited the Northeast so well. And they won recruiting battle after recruiting battle. And that's why they had that stretch of 8 straight seasons of 10-plus wins that to their advantage, because they took everything from Virginia and they took a lot from the Northeast. But Bronco, his first 3 classes, maybe even at 4th class, not very highly recruited, but he did what George did back in the 80s and what Beamer did late 80s, early 90s. You got to do this. It's what Tony Bennett did. To get the Virginia basketball program where it is now. You've got to wring more wins out of lower rated recruiting classes to be able to give yourself access to better recruiting classes. And we saw Welsh do that. That was the blueprint for what Beamer did at Virginia Tech. After Welsh was able to win some games at Virginia with guys who weren't supposed to win games, then he got guys like Kirby and Slade and more, and boy, you just go down the list of guys that Welsh was able to get. Those guys were supposed to win games, and they did. Beamer did the same thing. Tony Bennett's done the same thing. And now we're seeing Bronco Mendenhall. He won games with guys that weren't supposed to win games in the ACC. He went to an Orange Bowl with a bunch of 2- and 3-star guys. And now he's getting 4-star guys. There are some guys in this mix that have committed for 2021 that are borderline 5-star guys who are committed to UVA. They weren't getting these guys. We haven't gotten those kind of guys since Terry Kirby and Chris Slade. So whereas the folks down in the southwest part of our state, they're not getting those guys right now. And boy, when the talent flow stops going your way, that's what happened. That's what happened to Virginia for all that time. That's why for 15 years after we kind of ran George Welsh off, we weren't very good in football, because if you don't have the players, it's hard to win the games.
You know, I had an opportunity to talk to Jerry Ratcliffe personally just a couple of days ago, and we were talking about football. And Jerry's probably the foremost expert on UVA sports that we know. And I asked him, I said, what do you contribute? What do you think is the leading contributor to the fact that Broncos just really having success recruiting? Do you think it's the commitment that Carla has made to football to the program, you know, with the new practice fields, and then a little bit later on the football center? And he said, in his opinion, it was, you know, early on, you know, Bronco talked about the family atmosphere, but that early on, that's kind of maybe looked at as cliche-ish. But he really felt like recruits were really getting a good sense of Bronco Mendenhall and who he was, and that he really did promote that family atmosphere. That when you come to Virginia, you may be leaving your family behind, but you're coming into a brotherhood, to a family situation, and you're going to be taken care of, and you're going to have a lot of support there. And I really believe that is playing a significant factor in their recruiting success. And the lottery's there. The more you really believe he is who he says he is.
Yeah, and we've seen that with both Bronco and Tony Bennett in the basketball program. You build a culture first, and then you build the wins come afterwards. And you got to establish, and both guys require a lot of hard work. Both programs require a lot of hard work out of the players, but it's directed hard work. It's not just menial stuff. It's not punishment kind of stuff. It's here's how you get better kind of stuff. And the strength and conditioning in both of the realms. The football certainly is beefed up since Carla Williams got to UVA. Virginia's best hire outside of Tony Bennett was when he hired Mike Curtis to be a strength and conditioning coach. And the guys come in. DeAndre Hunter was 6'7", 180, and he was 225 or 230 when he left, and had shoulders that looked like a bodybuilder when he left. That's what turns guys from 3-star recruits into 4th picks in the draft. And we saw Bryce Hall go from a 2-star player out of the state of Pennsylvania, the 200th best player in Pennsylvania. I think it was actually 202nd best player in Pennsylvania, to being a potential 1st-round draft pick. We were disappointed he was a 5th-round draft pick. The 2-star recruit 4 years ago would have said, I get to play in the NFL? Holy crap, that's awesome. But you turn guys into better players because of the commitment you make to them to make them better people. It's a process. And, Virginia got it right with both those guys, hiring guys that not just putting the wins as a priority, it's building programs, building camaraderie, building people. And then if you do all that, the wins will come. And that's the approach for both of those programs.
Yeah, and certainly you can't underestimate what Carla has done. Really, taking personal interest in that football program and getting the money there to hire the recruiting coordinators and strength people. You can't, money does talk as well.
Well, and the money's being put into, especially so much has been put into the strength and conditioning, and that's what builds the people. Of course, now what they're doing, this is the interesting thing. They're building these programs for guys to be able to get workouts in this COVID environment. No gyms are open. At least now, gyms are starting to open up. We're starting to see the country open back up slowly. It'll be interesting to see how things have gone the last couple of months with these guys. I know I've been on some of these Zooms with players. Brennan Armstrong was able to finagle, I guess a neighbor of his has a garage gym, if you want to call it that, a couple sets of weights, and he's been able to lift weights with his brother and a couple of guys off his old high school football team. Charles Snowden, here's the thing about Charles Snowden, when he was talking to us, 6'7", 230-pound linebacker doing push-ups and sit-ups in his basically his living room. So that's what he's able to do. But the strength and conditioning, certainly the investment. Carla brought big boy football. She came most recently from Georgia. She had a tenure as an athletics administrator at Florida State. She brought big boy football mentality to UVA. It wasn't just let's hire a woman to be our athletics director, just to hire a woman to be our athletics director. It was, we're hiring this serious athletics person to lead us to the next level. And boy, she has done that. And football we've seen. I mean, you don't have to look at any further. I'm wearing a shirt that has the Capital One Orange Bowl logo on it. I'm not wearing this shirt that I picked up in Miami a couple of months ago, if not for Carla Williams and Bronco Mendenhall. But Carla Williams coming in and giving the support to Bronco Mendenhall to help him and his staff do what they've done in the last 4 years.
Carla looks like, if you look at Carla and didn't know Carla, she looks like she'd be very comfortable in a minivan with about 4 or 5 girls in the back, taking them to a Girl Scout jamboree or something, But to think her position and the responsibility she has and the commitment she has, wow, man, I tell you what, she's got a lot on her plate, but other than that logo thing, she's really delivered for UVA.
If I was the soccer coach that she was unloading 4 kids from and getting ready for practice, I would cower being that coach, because I would assume that she would give me lots of direction on how I could do a better job.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be late.
I would make sure to I'd make sure to impress that particular soccer mom if that was the case of Carla Williams, because
now if she watches, I'm not saying she should be a soccer mom.
No.
That's not my point.
I'm just imagining. Yeah, we know from behind the scenes some of the we've heard tales of the blistering emails that she sent to various higher ups without really identifying too much more than that. I wouldn't want to be I wouldn't want to be like the high school volleyball coach who had to meet with Carla's daughter's mom after a practice.
And we like being a part of the UVA media contingent too.
No, I'm just saying. No, I'm just. Yeah, she's definitely. I mean, she has raised the level. She's beyond raised the level, and she hasn't even done what she's set out to do yet in terms of that $150 million performance center that's coming online already. No, she in her mind she hasn't even begun to do what she's going to do at UVA. And in the meantime, yeah, we've got a national championship in basketball. We've got an Orange Bowl appearance in football, and in her mind, she's just getting started. So. Hey Scott, any other thoughts? I gotta mention you wrote a really good. I called it a damn good baseball column that we published last night. It's on the front page of the site now, telling some stories about how we don't need to fix baseball. It ain't broke. I love the approach you took in that story. I'm like you, man. What's wrong with baseball? We don't need 7-inning games. We don't need the two strikeouts. All this crap that you're seeing thrown out there. Just keep playing baseball the way it's played, and if people don't want to join in, that's fine. There's baseball still draws millions of fans every year. TV ratings are fine. I was at the World Series for the 3 games in DC this year. All those games were sold out. The tickets were $1,000 each. I think baseball is just fine the way it is.
I do too. And what prompted me about this was I was watching for the 10,000th time a replay of a classic game, and I'm getting sick of watching those. And then I was listening to a radio program out of New York a couple of nights ago, and they were talking about how this hiatus of baseball has kind of let MLB regroup a little bit, and maybe MLB would look at when they do resume play this year, if they do, hopefully they will, that they might sort of unofficially count this season as an exhibition season and start throwing out some of those crazy rule changes that they had gotten. And these rule changes that they had solicited, they weren't coming from Joe Schmoes. These were suggestions that they were getting back from members of the Major League Baseball Writers Association of America, established writers. Crazy, like 2 strikes and you're out, 7-inning games, extra inning games that start with runners at second base, which is not a bad idea. Minor leagues already do it, and it's really a really great way to speed up the game after 9 innings. But having not had any baseball to watch and just absolutely going crazy at night with nothing to watch now that Better Call Saul is finished, I'd sit down and watch the Orioles play the Detroit Tigers, and I don't care if it took 7 hours and 20 minutes, would be a thing of beauty to me.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of, there was a game, one of the O's playoff chases several years ago when they were playing out in Seattle. So it was already a late start because it's Seattle, and the game went until like 4:30 in the morning. And I remember I was on Facebook, and you and Paul Boyers, the two O's fans I know the best, and we were like, are anybody else still awake? Yeah, the 3 of us were. Yeah, watching that game at 4:30 in the morning as the O's were trying to clinch a wild card berth that year. They did that year, as it turns out. But it didn't matter that the game was 7 hours. It didn't matter it was 4:30 in the morning. It was a baseball game, and yeah, I can't wait. I'll tell you, Scott, I've noticed, I haven't done it yet, but ESPN, the Korean Baseball League, has started back up. They're a few weeks ahead of us in terms of their recovery process from COVID-19. Korean baseball started back up, and ESPN's broadcasting the games at like 2 in the morning. I'm like you. I've watched enough classic baseball, probably too much. And so there are like 1 or 2 players on each one of these Korean teams that are from the U.S. Tyler Wilson's one of them, former UVA player. I might start getting into Korean baseball until our major leagues start back up, which the report is, in fact, that they're already talking with players about the next steps. Looks like mid to late June, 80 to 100 game season. We've already seen some things thrown out in terms of realigning for 1 year from 2 leagues to 3 10-team divisions, which effectively would be leagues that would put our O's and our Nats into one division for us for this one season. Actually, I don't mind that if they wanted to do that for the future, as far as that kind of stuff goes. But so we're seeing enough, and we're seeing enough in terms of specifics that makes me think that it's far enough along that we're probably 4 to 6 weeks away. Plus, the German soccer league starting back up early next week. The English Premier League is getting ready to start up. NASCAR's starting up. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of. But I said all that, Scott, to say this: is Korean baseball a possible substitute for you for the next few weeks?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't own a DVR, so I would have to watch it as it's played, and that's fine. I'll go to bed early and get up, and watch it. And here's the other interesting: those games are also being played, I believe, without fans.
Right.
So it'll prepare us in the event that MLB does return without fans. It'll kind of give us an idea of what we're going to be watching and how to watch it without the backdrop of the fans being in the stadium.
I'll throw this out to you, Scott, as we're wrapping up here. I was asked this. I was on a radio show in Florida yesterday, and I was asked this question, so I know my answer. Of all the sports, which would be most affected if we didn't have, if there's no fans? And I say this for our viewers out there. Scott and I were actually in a basketball arena getting ready to watch a basketball game with no fans. They didn't play it. They stopped the clock with like 9 minutes to go in the warm-up clock. But so of the major sports, basketball, football, baseball, which of the sports most affected with no fans, which least affected with no fans?
Oh, wow. I have to think about that, but I'm just going to, flippantly say football would be the most affected maybe. And maybe basketball would be the least, because we talked about how many games these players in college play in AAU ball in front of no fans. And in fact, that was some of the conversations at the ACC tournament, that the morning of the games that we were anticipating going to. Well, the players aren't going to really be affected by this because they've played an entire AAU career in gyms with no fans. So maybe basketball would be the least and football would be the most, because the crowd wouldn't have any. It wouldn't be hard to hear singles and things like that being called, and momentum, maybe the momentum of the game. I don't know. Just if I have time to think about it, I'll probably reverse it. But football maybe most, basketball least.
See, here's we disagree, so that's good because it makes for boring radio, as I like to say, if we agree. I thought basketball most, because it's inside, the sound collects. When you're in JPJ, which we're fortunate to be there 15, 18 times a year, whatever it is, when a home team's making a rally, it's so loud. And I don't care what the players say, they have to feel that on the floor. And the referees feel it. That. The referees hear the boos when they make a bad call. And baseball to me is least affected. To me, baseball's not a momentum sport. Baseball is the pitcher and the hitter. And to me, baseball and football, both the ball's only in play for a few seconds at a time. There's always, the pitcher's looking in for the sign. There's 30, 40 seconds between pitches sometimes. In football, there's always 30 to 40 seconds between plays because there's a 40-second play clock. And those are both largely outside. Even the football games or baseball games that are played in dome stadiums, they're still outside. The fields are so big. The basketball court's so small. All the sound collects down. That was my reasoning. Because we were talking about that actually in the context of then NASCAR starting back up. I can't imagine NASCAR is any different with nobody there watching. Certainly the drivers don't notice it. And then we were talking about the combat sports, like pro wrestling has been going through this process. Pro wrestling is completely opposite without fans. Wrestling is really struggling with no fans because everything they do is to get the fans to either cheer or boo. Basketball to me is the most like wrestling. I think basketball kind of feels like a sport that there's good guys, there's bad guys. You either root for Coach K or you hate him. And if you hate him, every time he looks at you, the crowd goes crazy. The crowd tries to influence the referees. So anyway, that was sort of my thought process there.
Well, if you in basketball, if a game with no fans, you'd eliminate one thing: makeup calls.
Well, that's right. I mean, it would be a fairer game, right? And I like your thought process. I did mention football. I kept football in the middle of the two because, defensively, when the home crowd is trying on third down to scream so that the other team can hear their signals, that's obviously gone with no crowd. So I think by the time the fall rolls around, we'll have fans at games, maybe not packed stadiums, but, there'll be social distancing likely in place, well, possibly in place, I should say. Which actually for UVA, I say this cynically, we've already been playing football games at home for several years with social distancing rules in place. So that won't be a big departure for us. It might be hard for Alabama and LSU to play in front of 40,000 people at home, but hey, we're used to playing in front of 30,000 in Scott Stadium, so that won't be a big departure for us at all.
No, but with the momentum we have coming off of an Orange Bowl performance, a great recruiting season so far, I have a feeling if we are allowed to play with fans, normal capacity, you're going to see a lot of 50,000 plus games at Scott Stadium this fall, even with a bad schedule.
They're trying to sell us tickets, Scott. They called Crystal's phone twice yesterday. They being UVA football, the UVA athletics folks. They're trying to sell Crystal some season tickets. So they're proceeding like they need to make some more money. And so that to me, that's a good sign when they're still trying to sell tickets, whereas our baseball people are calling us and giving us some options. The football people are full steam ahead. So by the time it's today's what I have to look at. It's Thursday. It's Thursday, May 7th. We're still 4 months away from Labor Day night. That's a long time between now and Labor Day night.
A lot of good things can happen.
A lot of good things will happen between now and Labor Day night. That's right.
Yeah, I think our politicians realize what shutting the economy down creates, and I believe that it's going to be some rapid developments in the medical field, and we're going to see a different atmosphere. We're going to see a different world in the next couple of months, hopefully.
That's right. Well, that's your medical update here from Chris and Scott. As quick and thorough as they need to be. Hey, Scott, thank you for your time on this. This is a lot of fun. You again advise our viewers out there to read Scott's baseball column. Really well done column. And we'll talk to you again soon. We'll talk to our viewers out there again soon. Everyone have a great day.